Welcome back, horror fans. We've got an interesting video today. This is the horror topics tier list. So you know how it goes, right? You want to watch something scary, on YouTube, or it's, Halloween time and you kind of got that itch. So you start looking for things that are interesting. But more than likely, you're going to, maybe have a hard time finding what you're looking for, or maybe you find it, but then it's kind of buried within a lot of other topics that you don't really vibe with. So horror is such like a broad term or such like a broad umbrella that it can be really hard to pin down kind of what you find really interesting. And this is the same too with like talking about horror, right? So if I am talking with my friend and I start talking about like occult studies or, ghosts or something like that, he might think I'm weird. But that same friend might have no problem, watching like a true crime podcast or listening to a true crime podcast or a documentary about serial killers or something messed up like that. Even though it would be if not horror, at least maybe like horror adjacent, right? Or someone might say that same person might say like, oh, I don't like horror movies at all, but then he might be into something else that's on this list, right? So it's kind of hard to pin down. No one's really like pinned it down basically. I think Mr. Ballin's probably come the closest. So he labels his channel as the strange, dark, and mysterious, which is vague, but I think accurate. And then he kind of puts his own spin on it. It's kind of like his own style. So he can talk about, primarily true crime these days, but then also talk about ghosts, and it doesn't seem out of place. I think he's done the best job of kind of putting it under his brand, under one umbrella. So let's look at this criteria. So this is going to be my opinion. I'm going to try to be as objective as I can. And this is how I'm going to like frame it. So S tier means that when it hits, it hits. So it doesn't mean that every single thing under this category is, the best, but when you find like a good video of this or, a good example of this, it's really entertaining and it kind of leaves a kind of like a thought in your mind, after you're done watching it. And I think that's kind of the highest compliment that some media can get, when it kind of changes how you think. Like you watch The Matrix for the first time. Like that's what I'm talking about. So that's S tier. And then A tier is like, it's usually pretty interesting. So if I see it like in my YouTube recommended, or I see a book about something, or I learn something new, I'm like, oh, I got to check that out. It's usually going to be pretty good. And then B tier is going to be kind of like middle of the road, consistently good, but it can be like run of the mill. So this also can be if a topic is like very oversaturated, so it's kind of been talked about a lot, then it can be like a little bit more B tier as well. C is going to be similar to B, but it just means it's more inconsistent or more problematic. So inconsistent, like you don't know if you watch it if it's going to be like a video, if it's going to be cool or not as cool, or there's some kind of like something more problematic within it, because it's horror. There's a lot of sensitive topics, obviously. So that one's going to be the most subjective or most relevant, most pertaining to your experience. What you put in C, it's going to be the most subjective. And then F, it just means I don't think it's generally worth your time. It doesn't mean that there's never anything cool there. Just, I don't think it's worth your time. It's not really worth looking into. And then I'm not really going to go in, like put things in order within the tiers. That's too much nitpicking. It's just in no general order. And then just going alphabetical. All right, so the first one, ARGs. These are alternate reality games. So if you don't know, that's something like some website or some scenario someone makes, like, I am Jigsaw, the puppet master. You need to solve my puzzle to get all the Dragon Balls and go to this location. Things like that. I think the Cicada one was probably the most famous one. So I think these can be pretty cool. However, with this one, it's kind of like cat's out of the bag, in the sense that if someone tries to make a new one, like instead of people like wondering what it is or like who's behind it or how to solve the puzzle, then now people are going to say like, oh, it's an ARG, right? Cat's kind of out of the bag. And so I'm putting ARG in F. So I don't think they're really worth your time. Also going with that is that I think the cool thing about kind of stuff like this is the idea that like anyone can solve it, or like, if you have the time or if you have the knowledge, you could like solve a mystery and win, a gold treasure or whatever. But these are going to be like so cryptic, right, that you don't really get that. I think the closest thing that's like adjacent to this is the one guy in like, I think it was like in New Mexico that buried treasure in the forest somewhere. So like I think that one's like the closest one because that one feels like you could do it. But yeah, I don't think we'll see like a good ARG that like really captivates the public's attention. That's my opinion. So ARG is going in F, generally not worth your time. Next is astrology. F. Next is conspiracy theories. So this one's a really tricky one. So this has a category of C, where it's problematic. People doing like really, really messed up shit because of some conspiracy theory on, AM radio or 4chan or whatever. So that kind of puts it in F category, where it's like very, very problematic. But also this gets really blurry because of things like MK Ultra, where if you didn't know about it, you would just assume that it's some sci-fi or like something made up. But then it actually happened. Right? And then things seem like conspiracies until like they're proven, or like not proven, but someone like leaks something, right? Or like a journalist leaks something, or there's a FOIA request. And then it's like, oh, the government was doing this the whole time. So conspiracy theories kind of have merit in that sense, but then I don't have a way of saying, oh, believe this, but don't believe that, right? It's, people are going to have different opinions. Even like Epstein, I think technically, if you doubt the like kind of the media story, then that kind of like makes you a conspiracy theorist, even though everybody that I've personally talked to about it like doesn't believe the media narrative. So like that too, right? So with that said, conspiracy theories is going to go in C, just kind of as a whole. They can't be an F because there's like actually like good stuff there, but it can't be in B because there's too many kind of wacky ones, and it can get really messy. I'm not going to get into that. All right, next one is creepypasta. So creepypastas are kind of these kind of earlier internet fictional stories, and it was kind of like a subgenre of fiction where it was like the name suggests, copy paste. It was meant to be like copy pasted, and it's just like the ghost story of like, ooh, I knew this guy who knew this guy who sang whatever in the mirror 3 times. But in terms of early internet, so it'd be something involving the internet, or like a video game or something like that. So these definitely had their place in history. So they've not, maybe not in all of history, but internet history for sure. Early internet history. These are really interesting. But if you read them now, they're all like really silly. Like, okay, there's not like a cursed Sonic the Hedgehog game. But at the time, we were kids, so they seemed really real. So I'm going to put creepypasta in F, in the sense of these stories that are purported to be true. If you're into like fiction, right, or like fiction writing, fiction stories, those are still cool. But specifically this style of story that is like early internet, meant to be like passed off as true. So they had their place, good memories, but I don't think there's don't think in that sense of believing that it's true that it's going to be anything worth your time today. It's going to seem pretty silly by today's standards. All right, next up is cryptids. So this is kind of just like a blanket term for, animals that are not, trying to describe this, like mythical creatures basically is another way to put it, where it also has a quality where like they could be true, but nobody's ever captured one or seen under very rare circumstances. Think along the lines of like Chupacabra, the Bigfoot, the Mothman, those kinds of things. Cryptids are really, really interesting. I actually really enjoy them. I am putting cryptids in A, with the reason that these are, even like when they're not real, they're really interesting, and then you can kind of learn a lot about the cultures that it came from as well. So I don't know if these would be considered cryptids, but when like learning about Super Mario and like the Kappas, like the green, I just always thought they were green turtles, right? But then I learned about Kappas, like, oh, there's like whole lore behind that, and so that's really interesting. I've talked to like friends about how like every culture has dragons, right? No one's ever seen a dragon because the dragons aren't real, but it kind of says something about the culture. Like, you know, you hear like a thunderstorm and you think like, oh, there must be a monster out there. So in that sense, I think cryptids are really interesting, and it's also cool that it can kind of tell you about the culture or maybe the location that they're meant to be in. I really really enjoy cryptid stories, so cryptids is getting an A. Next one is cults. Cults is like, I love learning about cults. Uh, Cults are so interesting, honestly. So much to be said here, but you know they all have kind of like very similar beats. If you've researched one or two cults, right, you start noticing patterns. It's always like a charismatic leader, kind of like disaffected people go join them, and then you know in the worst case they drink Kool Aid. In the best case they'll kind of just kind of wither on the vine. But like cults are really really interesting, and I think more people need to know about cults, just like in general, to kind of protect, you know, to protect yourself and then protect, your loved ones in case somebody ever falls for a cult. And it doesn't have to be like as crazy as, the like what's his name, John Jones. It could even just be like Herbalife, um, the selling like bulk cheap quality supplements. It doesn't have to be like a full cult where they're doing crazy stuff, but it can have something can have like cult like qualities where it's, I'm not even saying it's like a range of cult, but there's like culty aspects to something. Even like the Walmart cheer, that like I consider that a cult like thing. I think most people kind of know all the famous ones, like John Jones or like Scientology, like uh, all those crazy ones. But I always like learning about them. Cults is going in S. All right, next one, cursed images. This is probably going to be one of the more least serious topics on here. I really like these. This is kind of, if you go like to the cursed images like subreddit, you'll see examples, but it's basically an image where something is like slightly off. It could be serious or it could be kind of silly, but it's kind of tangential or similar to like what is it, subliminal spaces, liminal spaces, where it's an image just has like a quality that you can't describe, but something is off. And probably something is off, but you just can't identify it in the moment because it's subtle. Um, I really enjoy cursed images quite a bit. So cursed images is going in A. Not everything is gonna be a banger, right? Because it's kind of, you can't do that kind of thing consistently. But I really enjoy it, and it can be kind of like a game to kind of see like what's off with a certain picture. All right, next up is dark web, aka the Tor network. That is going in F. I think kind of the peak of that was learning about like when Silk Road was active. And then, if you're watching a video essay that said like there's a site on the deep web that you could only access through a hidden network that sells drugs and other illegal things. And that was true at the time. So that's kind of like, oh, what in the world is that? So at a time, right, this was really an interesting topic, and people didn't really know about like Tor, like how any of that worked. Uh, I don't think there's anything that's like really, you have to like access the Tor network for to like get your fix. right? I'm sure there's like so many bad things just like on private Facebook groups or like WhatsApp messages that are probably, worse than the stuff is purported. So I don't think this topic is like really interesting. Yeah, like the twisted stuff is, yeah, like the Facebook groups. I don't know if like WhatsApp groups are a thing, but you can just access twisted stuff on a normal web browser. Dark web is not too relevant anymore these days, I think. All right, next one is ghost stories. So this is kind of just general, stories of like a haunted place or a ghost of a person. And this is probably the oldest form of horror that's on here. So I am thinking if I want to put this in S or an A. This is such a broad topic. I think for legacy, ghost stories has to go in S, because there's so many kinds. I can't really think of one that's like particularly like the banger ghost story, but just like so many interesting stories kind of across kind of multiple cultures and across history. I think I gotta put respect on ghost stories' names. Tangential. All right, next. So tangential to ghost stories is haunted house tours. So this is where people go to a purported haunted place and walk around. Maybe they'll try and communicate with a ghost or something like that. So these I don't really care too much for. On the one hand, I do think it is cool when people visit typically like a historical place, and you will learn the backstory of someone that lived there. But the radio stuff, that stuff is all whack. If you watch the old BuzzFeed Unsolved, whenever they do that, like I like learning about the history, but whenever they're freaking out because the radio picked up a little squeal and they freak out, like dude, no one cares, or people probably care. That's maybe a little mean. More like, okay, it's just a little interference or a little signal. Like you ain't gotta freak out. So haunted house tours. I'm actually gonna put it in B. I think it's kind of interesting to learn about some of these places. All right, next one, jump scares. F. There's nothing redeeming about jump scares. And then it goes in F more because when you talk to people about horror, or you say like you like horror movies or horror whatever, like half the time I tell someone that, like, right, he'll say like, "Oh, but I hate jump scares." Like that's not what horror is. It's just like the cheapest, uh, the cheapest little gotcha. So jump scares are irredeemable. All right, next up is lost media. Lost media is going straight into S tier. If you're not familiar, lost media is whenever there's, like a movie or book, anything like that was made at some point that is now inaccessible, or maybe just not accessible in a form that people can view or that people know about. There's just like so many good examples. I think just the fact that I don't know what the like a ballpark number, like half of like old Hollywood movies, don't exist anymore because they were burned up in like vault fires. Like that is crazy to me. A lot of these things, like I would love to actually watch a lot of those old films. I think that'd be really cool, but we can't because they just don't exist anymore. And it's kind of crazy to think for some of them, there's like a copy ends up in a garage in the filmmaker's grandson's attic, and then we find something like that, or like the Nosferatu one where the court ordered the films destroyed, but somebody kept it anyway. Someone kept it anyway. Those stories are really cool. So the only thing that keeps me from just becoming a lost media, guru or one of those guys is it would take so much time and money to try and like buy up estates or try to like visit archives to try and find some of these missing films. So whenever we do get something resurfaced, it's really rare, but then it's really cool. Even if I had no interest in it before, or I didn't know anything about it before, these are really, really fun topics. Pretty much always. There's always like a community that forms around it too, because it it makes the thrill of the hunt is very exciting. So Lost Media is going straight in S. Okay, next up is mystery stories. So this is just like any general fictional mystery. So that's just going straight in B. So I'm sure there's a lot of, it's just like any stories. There's like good ones and then kind of meh ones. But just like in general, the mystery is kind of like fun. The intrigue of not knowing, who's like the villain in a story, or like learning as you read and the story like unravels is really fun. Even just like Scooby Doo. Like Scooby Doo is not like a horror show, but it's like horror adjacent. It's like mysterious. It's intriguing. Just stuff like that. That's kind of why we're part of the reason why we're drawn to stories like that. All right, next up is mythology. So this is kind of just in general across cultures. Typically kind of like pagan or just very old systems of beliefs about how the world worked. Mythology is going in S as well, for kind of partly because of cultural legacy of how many of those things kind of influence today, and they're just interesting to learn about. Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it. All right, next up is occult studies. So this is kind of like a catch-all term for, practices, within cults, pagan practices, and it doesn't mean you do them. It just means you like learning about it. And like in every anime, like high school anime, there's always like an occult studies club, and then they're kind of like some weirdos. But like I'm pretty sure they're not, and I don't know if anyone's ever like been in one, but I'm pretty sure they're not like trying to summon demons. They're just interested in learning about stuff like that. So I think occult studies is pretty interesting. I'm hovering between B and C. I feel like most people probably don't take it seriously with something like a homunculus or a succubus. I'm pretty sure most people reading about it aren't literally trying to like summon a sexy demon lady. They're just like interested in it. So if like a lot of people were taking it seriously, I would probably put it in C. Like, don't try to summon a sexy demon lady. Just do something normal, please. It's going in B. I'm pretty sure most people just read it because they're curious, kind of like me. Kind of a funny story if you read Ozzy's autobiography. Rest in peace, Ozzy. He's kind of like talking about that, where he likes learning about like talking about dark topics, but he just kind of like curious. He wants to like learn, kind of just explore, and then there'd be like people like in hooded robes like outside his like hotel room like with candles and like doing weird stuff. And you have to tell him like, hey man, I'm not about that. Like you guys get out of here. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. Like it's interesting to learn about, but it doesn't mean that if you read about stuff like that you're actually like gonna do it. All right, next up is original journalism. This is like along the lines of the Vice documentaries, where they have like a whistleblower talking about some like twisted topic or like some twisted company, or something like that. Original journalism along the lines of like Vice is going straight in S. The only thing really holding it back is that we can't verify. Well, Vice can verify, but we don't know, if the people are bullshitting or not. But they're still really interesting. If you haven't watched like the Vice documentary series, or like I'm not sure what it's called exactly, but they're like original kind of like whistleblower stories. They're really, really interesting. I really enjoy them. And then also with that you only like a news publication or a magazine like that would have the resources to seek these people out and have them come on and tell their stories. But I always learn a lot when I watch something like that. All right, up next is outer space, just like in general. Outer space is going straight in S tier. So in school, like, right, we learned about like the solar system just up to, what is it, Neptune, no longer Pluto. But then when you start getting like really into it, it's crazy. Like the scales of everything, the distances, trying to think of faster than light travel as possible, wormholes, black holes, supermassive black holes. Like, watch the 360 view of falling into a black hole. All that stuff is really crazy. Earth-like planets, all that stuff is so interesting. Outer space is straight and S tier. It will never get old. Also, this probably is the oldest thing on this list. Well, that, and ghost stories are probably the oldest topics. All right, next up is psychosis. So I kind of put this as like a general term for any mind-altering state or mind-altering substances. So I think this is pretty interesting. Hearing stories about people like that. They could be like kind of sad though, honestly. Like when people are in altered mental states and they do something, something tragic. But like it is interesting hearing people talk about, they trip on some weird thing and they describe it, or like the LSD Dream Emulator game. That one is interesting. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this just in B. I think it's interesting to read about or hear about, but don't don't get any bright ideas. Don't want anyone doing anything real weird to his mind. All right, next up is Reddit or 4chan stories. So the basic idea is that there's the OP, the original poster on the thread. The thread is let's talk about some topic, and then just the Reddit users or the 4chan anons just reply. These are really cool. I really like these. I really enjoy stories that are not from professional writers and it's just regular dudes. I think these are really cool, especially when it's a kind of a broad topic where you wouldn't be able to get the same thing from a news article, and it's just people just firing at the hip, just regular people. It's not real polished. It's just right off the cuff. I really enjoy these. This is going straight in A. And then what's holding this back is just you have to wait for a topic to come up. You're kind of just you're kind of just waiting for Reddit or 4chan to kind of do their thing. And then obviously you can't verify the stories, but that's fine. Kind of the idea is you're kind of waiting through it and waiting through these stories and seeing what people have to say. And then there's obviously a lot of gems. If you read or if you watch Wang's channel, he talks about a lot of these. So a lot of them have kind of take on a life of their own, beyond Reddit or 4chan, and they become just general knowledge. So that kind of I think shows the influence that Reddit and 4chan have. All right, next is rural town folklore. This is going in S. There's not a lot that I can point to. I just think it's cool if you're going to a rural area, or you're staying with some family somewhere, and the guy that lives in the town forever starts telling you stories of back long ago there was a man who lived in that house, and those stories are so captivating. I really really enjoy kind of folklore from rural towns where it's not you can just find it on the internet. You can't really verify it. It's just stories that are either passed down or they're only known to the people in that town. So I think this is really cool. I always really enjoy hearing the stories of people that live in kind of remote places. Really cool. Okay, up next is secret societies. So this is kind of a vague topic in the sense that there's a lot of different ones and not that much is really publicly available. So on the surface, these are kind of similar to cults, which I put an S, and I guess they kind of have similarities. But the more I look into it, secret societies like Freemasons and all that, on the one hand, it is a little weird how many influential people have claimed membership in these groups. But then on the other hand, whenever I research what they do these days, I end up just thinking these just seem like a bunch of old men that are kind of just sitting around and shooting the shit. And they're kind of, I don't know, maybe bored. I don't know. If anyone watching has is in one of these secret societies or like has a family member, maybe you can tell me. But I think kind of the point is that you don't learn more about it unless you're a member. So I'm never going to join one. So maybe they're doing crazy, weird, like evil Epstein stuff, or maybe I think they're probably just old men, kind of just trying to find something to do, which is fine. I respect it. So I'm putting secret societies in C. And I think if people wanted to do messed up stuff like Epstein, they would just do it anyway. So secret societies, yeah, they're fine. All right, next is sleep paralysis. So this one's, I really like learning about this one because I think probably this is like the most that it kind of not debunks stories, but when you kind of understand what this is, it kind of like filters out so many people's stories. Whenever someone says, I was by myself at night and then I saw a monster or I saw a ghost. So basically what happens is like when you're tired, right, your brain's not working as well because you're tired, and like your brain when it's tired, especially when it's dark, it can like hallucinate. Or if you took a nap or went to sleep, you woke up, you can hallucinate a figure or like a person in your room, and it's going to be different for everybody. So when people, so like if people say a story, something like that of, oh, I was in my room at night, and then I took a nap, and when I woke up, I saw my dead aunt staring at me. I'm inclined to think that they were probably telling the truth. It's just that, your mind at night when you're tired is not reliable. So these all kind of feel the same to me. So I don't like hearing a lot about them, but they are interesting to know about. So sleep paralysis going in C. Okay, up next is true crime. So this is crime stories that happened, typically involving some really messed up crime. Like murder is really the most common. This is kind of, I think, going to be the most polarizing topic. Yeah. So a lot of people that aren't into horror are into true crime. They'll listen to podcasts or watch something like Criminal Minds on TV, where they're like depicting really, really terrible things. And on the one hand, it can be interesting to be informed about like things that happened, especially if they form some kind of like legal precedent. It can be really interesting. It can be really, really interesting to kind of see how, I guess, law enforcement in that area handled it, or how the government handled it, if it's like FBI involved. On the other hand, it's not very problematic, but it can be very problematic in the sense that, it's people's suffering, and, the families of some of those people might still be alive. And so if, my uncle died to a serial killer, I don't want to watch someone plaster his face right front and center, or people looking for attention. And then the topics can be very overdone too. I'm not saying people can't tell this kind of story, that kind of story. It's more like it's, more morally ambiguous, morally problematic. So this is gonna go somewhere between B and C. I think I want to put it in C, but if I'm being subjective, I think I gotta put true crime in B, just because of how many people kind of like indulge in it. And then you also kind of do learn a lot from true crime the more that you listen to it. As after watching like Mr. Ballin long enough, it's like, okay, I won't go out by myself, right? If it's, you got to use the buddy system. Don't go into some weird forest where there might be some crazy man. So I think this is probably the most common kind of horror topic if you just go by like numbers. True crime. All right, next is UFOs. So this is distinct from outer space. This is specifically flying saucers in the sky manned by little green men. So UFOs are pretty interesting. They can't be F, even just like the idea of it. On the other hand, like we don't have one, then we can like I want to see the aliens, damn it. you know, uh the guys that went to Area 51, like they had the right idea, like I want to see the damn aliens, show them to me. But we don't have it, and so it's like we're just forever blueballed. But they are really interesting. We do have government, like U.S. military video of UFOs, which is crazy too. And you can say, well, it's this or it's that or whatever. So I am going to, let's see, what is like objectively the best place to put UFOs? I'm going to put them in C, kind of in the sense of, for the sake of inconsistency, especially when there's, you know, everyone has like a phone around now, but we still want to have like HD close up footage of a UFO. If we ever get close up like HD footage of a UFO, then that's like going straight in S. But for now, UFOs, specifically flying saucers, are in C. But this can change. All right, next up is urban exploration. This is people kind of going to abandoned areas, maybe like an old house or like an abandoned building, hospital, church, mall. I really enjoy these kind of videos, kind of for similar to rural town folklore. And a lot of them are in rural areas as well. These areas kind of have their own personalities, and learning about the history of the building and seeing something that is used for one purpose now just abandoned is kind of has that kind of cursed image kind of vibe to it where it just feels off. It's like going to a school at night where you're kind of used to seeing it one way with like full of kids and everything. And then when it's not in that setting and there's no one, it's kind of like it creeps you out, right? For good reason. So these are pretty interesting. A lot of people do like old abandoned caves and stuff like that. These are cool. Urban exploration is going in A. Very interesting. All right, up next is a video essays. This is kind of just talking about a topic. They can be really, really good. They can be kind of like bad. F tier if it's just like AI reading a, ChatGPT prompt. So I'm just gonna put them just straight in B. I really like, especially like long video essays. Some like a Wendigoon. If we're talking about Wendigoon, that's like, S or A tier. But just video essays in general, I'll just put them in B. But they can be very, very good as well. And then I like hearing someone go like very in depth about one topic. That's why I like Wendigoon is cool. All right, last one is actually like horror movies. And this is kind of like just broad. This could be like any horror movie. I feel like I have to just put horror movies in B. Obviously, there's going to be like really good ones, and then kind of similar to video essays where it can kind of like range across the board. But this is kind of what most people probably think of if I say like horror, like, oh, horror movie is like a scary. And it can kind of like range across like any one of these topics. But what's really cool about horror movies is it kind of touches on that like typically like a primal human fear. And I think that's kind of just like in general what makes horror movies like captivating or interesting is, that some internal fear that people have that maybe they can't articulate. And it's interesting too seeing it, based on the culture or like based on the time period of like what people were afraid of during that time. So what's that movie, like Rosemary's Baby, right? And then being like devil worshippers, like to me that's like silly, right? But like at the time, right, that was something that people were like thought was like a real thing. So stuff like that. So horror movies are interesting. I don't know like a whole lot. I'm sure there's people that know a lot, but I would like to watch a lot more. And I think that pretty much covers this kind of first tier list. I'm kind of surprised how evenly this came out. It's like almost mirror image, kind of like split halfway. I originally thought I was gonna like be too negative, kind of coming in hot with the ARGs, but I actually did it like this is actually like very very well balanced. Okay, sweet. All right, that is the first horror movie, or not horror movie, the first horror topics tier list. So let me know kind of what you thought. This is all my opinion, but if you think I missed something, or something should be higher or lower for some reason, or if you want to suggest new topics for a new one, then I can make a part 2 as well. All right. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your night.